Did the message of the gospel change in the first few centuries after Jesus' life?
And what we're trying to say is that the gospel message was succinct and clear from the get-go. You could say from Jesus on, but we're going to take you to the early witnesses of what they said. We're not saying this is, you got to understand this just because this is what the Bible says, but we're saying that these letters that are in the New Testament are the earliest sources we have that are telling you what the early Christians believed themselves and what they said. You can't go any further than that. And so, Gerald, I want to take this verse here of Paul in the book of Galatians. How early did Galatians come out?
Galatians is, Galatians is debated depending on which part of Galatia it's written to, but we're in the 50s. We're in the early 50s.
Yeah, so you're talking, 20 years after Jesus, and Paul makes this statement admonishing those at Galatia. I'm astonished, Paul says, that you are so quickly deserting him who called you in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel. Not that there is another one, but there are some who trouble you and want to distort the gospel of Christ. Then Paul says, but even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed. And if they didn't get the first time, he then repeated that, Darrell. What does that mean about the gospel message?
What Paul is arguing is that the gospel message that he brings and the gospel message that the apostles bring is the gospel message. It does not change. What we see in the New Testament is discussion about the theology that grows out of that core. And certainly what you see in different writers are different emphases in developing different implications around what that core gospel is. But this core gospel is fixed. That's why, going back to what we did earlier, that's why when you have the sacraments and you sit at the Lord's table, you're declaring the Lord's death until He comes. That's why when you participate in baptism, you're being washed and cleansed to show the gift of life that comes in the provision of the Spirit that gives you life forever. That's what the gospel is. And this comes through Jesus Christ, not just in a death for sin, because what death for sin does is clean the slate so that now God can come into your life and impact you in terms of who you are and the way you walk with Him in the future. So what we are seeing is the delivery of a core theology that isn't changing. Now the reflection on it is endless because the gospel is profound. But the core theology is there from the beginning and it's not changing. And even though there's a pushback that Paul is sensing, there are opponents here that he's dealing with who are trying to frame the gospel differently. He's saying if you're connected to me and if you're connected to the apostolic group that walked and talked with Jesus, this is the gospel.